Hi, on behalf of Gaurav and myself, welcome to the latest episode of CFTE, FinTech and Web3 Founders. And today's special guest, zooming in from Dubai, Rudy, tell us about yourself. And I want to hear about your early years in gaming,
Sure.
particularly in Club Penguin.
That's a good one. Yes, thank you. So yeah, I mean, I've had over 15 years of experience in traditional games.
Mm.
Um, I started out actually at on Club Penguin way back in the day at Disney. And Club Penguin, I call it the first metaverse. I think they were doing some things that, I think the industry's still trying to catch up to. Yeah, well, maybe not that part, but yeah,
That was me doing a penguin very badly.
yeah. But digital items, open worlds, digital items, it was all
Yeah,
about that. And, it was a pioneer out West in
yeah,
free to play, which at the time, nobody was doing. I remember
yeah.
we had executives from EA and all over to come and ask us, they wanted to come and hang out with us and learn what we were doing, right? And now we know all these years later that free to play is the dominant model in games, right? So they were doing some really amazing stuff. From there, I went to Activision. I wanted to work on a game that was more for my age. So I went to Activision, worked there for 6 years on Call of Duty. I shipped 5 Call of Duty titles. That was like climbing a mountain every year. Extremely tough, extremely exhilarating, but one of the biggest brands in gaming. And then from there, I went to Blizzard. I worked on World of Warcraft for a number of years, which was incredible. I got, obviously an incredible brand as well, but I got exposed to item economies there. World of Warcraft is known for gray markets, and these gray markets, when you combine World of Warcraft and Lineage and some of the other games out there, they were enormous globally. We're talking billions of dollars a year of digital item transactions between players. So I got exposed to all of that working at World of Warcraft. And then 2018, I started looking at blockchain and saw an instant connection between what blockchain and NFTs could do relative to what I had experienced with games like World of Warcraft, right? And I was really excited about the potential of tapping into item economies, right? A technology that could help us really maximize the potential of this behavior that was already happening in the space. So I left Blizzard pretty much on the spot, I would say within weeks. And then founded a company called Mythical Games. I registered the company in April 2018 and spent the last, 5 years in Web3 deep in the trenches, at a time where, it wasn't even called Web3 when I started, when I founded Mythical. But dealing with all the complexities over the last 5 years around regulations, around the design space, around the technology challenges, right? And all of that led to a new perspective. And then late last year, I left Mythical and embarked on a new venture to take all of my learnings from the 15 years in games and the 5 years in Web3 and take the next step in the space.
Rudy, zoom in on that shift to Web3 5 years ago. So you kind of trailered it already by talking about ownership inside the games you were playing or helping design. And then a sense of community starting all the way back in Club Penguin. So you had the community, you had the sense of ownership. What was like the specific things that pulled you across into Web3, and what was it called back then? Are we just like blockchain-based gaming, or what was like literally what would you tell people? I'm off to do this, or
yeah. Well, I learned pretty quickly to call it blockchain and not crypto, because crypto came with a whole bunch of a perception that wasn't very welcomed by the mass market. And blockchain was still fairly unknown. You talk to the average person 5 years ago, they wouldn't be able to put 2 and 2 together that blockchain is Bitcoin, Bitcoin is blockchain, right?
What would they think? Like when you went to, I don't know, your friends or your parents said, hey, I'm getting into blockchain games. What did they think you were doing?
Well, it was kind of like, here we go again. it was in character because I was, on the ground floor with Free to Play all those years ago with Club Penguin. They didn't know what I was doing. There were friends who got it. There were friends who didn't. And, they just went, okay, Rudy's on another adventure. But, blockchain, what we had seen, so no Web3, that wasn't the term. NFTs just been coined, I would say like 6 months before I had jumped in by the CryptoKitties folks who pioneered the ERC 721 standard, right? And as a gamer and a game creator, this was a paradigm that I connected with instantly because in our world, we have this concept of rarity, right? This thing where you get the games where you get the super powerful sword that's very hard to get, right? The one of a kind, right? In the traditional game space, we didn't have a blockchain to manage all of that, but these were experiences we loved giving the players. When they got something really unique in the game, it was a moment to celebrate. This is what in World of Warcraft, it's what the players chased constantly. It was the coolest gear, the best gear, right? The coolest items. And so when I, started looking at NFTs, it was an instant connection for me because of that experience. And even more so to take it a step further, the idea of digital item sales were not new to our industry, right? Blockchain didn't invent that. We've had it for about 30 years. So I remember as a player back in the late 90s playing a game called Asheron's Call, which was published by Microsoft. And you could grind items and you could then go onto eBay and sell them for real money. And then you would have to come back to the game, stand by a tree and wait for the buyer to come along, right? And we call this sort of emergent behavior, right? Because we see this all the time in games where you see players and consumers engaging in ways that you didn't intend. And one of the biggest emergent behaviors was this kind of transacting over the last 30 years. As soon as we had items that you could earn and had utility, players placed value on those items and then they wanted to trade them. So we've had that for 30 years and we saw blockchain as a means to really tap into that because up until blockchain, it was all gray market. It was all outside of the ecosystem. Developer didn't get to participate financially. It was a Wild West experience. You could get ripped off. You could get, you didn't know who you were buying from, if it was real. And then even if you managed to successfully not get ripped off, it was against the terms of service for all the games you were playing. So if you got caught, you get banned, right? In spite of all of this, it was a behavior that, especially in the pandemic, Animal Crossing, tens of millions of dollars of digital fish and recipes being sold on eBay during launch in 2020, right? So we see this time and time again. And to me, blockchain was the technology that could help solve the great market problem.
Now, when you look at, particularly the last couple of years, blockchain-based or what we began to call Web3 games, how would you summarize all the developments and has it worked? I mean, I have my own views, which I'll share with you in a second, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean, has it worked so far? And if it has, what's worked and what's not really worked? So looking back, sort of, and then we'll talk about the future, but last couple of years of.
Yeah, so the last 5 years since I've been in this space, there's been a real heavy focus from investors and startups in infrastructure. When I got into space in 2018, I mean, there was really nothing. There was 3 blockchains, and no middleware or any kind of platform. The ERC 721 had just been created, but that was just a standard on how to create NFTs. There was nothing to latch onto as a game developer to help you build games, right? So, when you think about developing for Xbox or PlayStation or iOS and Android, these are mature development environments that provide a lot of support and have a lot of libraries and SDKs that you can integrate to make the development process easier. None of this existed. So we've seen now over the last 5 years an incredible amount of investment into infrastructure. And now we have 20 blockchains. We have a selection of middleware and platforms to choose from. And that's great. We've started to set the foundation, right? And I remember when I got in thinking, boy, wow, this is really cool. I'm in Web3 really early, or I'm in blockchain really early. But I'd say even today, you know, my friends message me because now everybody knows about blockchain. And they say, you know, I guess I'm late to the party. And I say, no, I mean, it's still really early, right? We've just laid down some of the foundation. And that's where the focus has been. Now, we've seen that blockchain has gone from this thing that nobody really knows about or talks about to, you know, NFTs exploding on the scene in 2020 and, you know, going mainstream. We had, you know, Axie Infinity and their play to earn concept get a lot of attention, for better or for worse. All of this created dialogue. And I remember going to my first meeting in January 2020. And I remember I got on the call with my deck that usually starts with why blockchain isn't a scam. And the person on the other end said, hey, I've been researching NFTs and I'm really excited to talk to you. And I was like, wow, this is great, right? So for better or for worse, people are talking about it. People are paying attention. And that's what the last 5 years has sort of brought us to. So now, you know, we can have that dialogue openly with big companies out there, enterprise level companies, and partners that we look to work with out there.
And if I think about it as a sort of cycle or a curve or peaks and troughs, and I'm thinking gaming specifically and Web3 or blockchain gaming, where are we in that cycle? Is it an up cycle, a down cycle, a trough of disillusionment, but coming out the other end? Think of the Gartner hype cycles. Where are we in that? Because emergent was a few years back, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at that adoption cycle, you know, we've experienced it in free to play back in the day as well. You know, we went to a point where, you know, there was a lot of resistance to from the mainstream audience to concepts like free to play. And now for us in games, history is repeating again, right? We have a real resistance from the mainstream audience. And I'd say largely because, you know, this is just my opinion here, but, you know, the mass market has seen NFTs as pictures of monkeys that sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then someone comes along and says, well, we're going to put that in your game. And they go, wait, that doesn't sound right. I don't want that in my game, right?
Yeah.
So, and then there's been a lot of experiments, right? Axie Infinity, I pick on again, explosive, you know, in terms of getting attention on the space, which is amazing for all of us. But also had some challenges in terms of, you know, how they were experimenting and the perception that gave the audience, right? And so we haven't had really a breakout game, you know, in the way that we eventually did with free to play, right? We had Clash of Clans, Supercell as an example, was the breakout game that really cemented free to play. And so, you know, we're not there yet. We are, and I would say combined with the resistance, and, you know, we have the bear market that we're in right now too, making it extra difficult. So we don't have much of an audience to speak to right now, and they're not spending a lot of money because because of the bear market. So it's a tough time right now.
I want to bring Gaurav into the conversation to drill into a little bit of the business building you've been doing, setting up Phoenix, also the previous journey at Mythical. So Gaurav, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ronit and Rudy. It's a pleasure to have you on the show with us today. I have to say, the first thing I have to ask you, and I'm sure a lot of people, and I can't help myself, who have played COD, right, are going to ask you, how much did you have to do with DDoS?
With what? DDoS?
DDoS, the map.
Yeah, no, I wasn't on that. I was on the multiplayer side of things, so on the level design.
That was the map everyone went to. I remember we used to have LAN parties. We'd get into Counter-Strike, we'd get into COD, and you'd go straight to DDoS, and everyone would just jump straight in. I mean, it's unbelievable that, you know, as someone that used to be very, very, very addicted to internet gaming cafes out here as a teenager, COD and Counter-Strike before COD, right? It was very old.
Really? That's amazing. Yeah. You're a true gamer.
Yeah, I still have Quake. I still have everything else. I still have the old stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. But you know, it's a pleasure to have you, and it's unbelievable when you talk about the evolution of the industry in so many facets, right? First, you have hardware, then you have the software, then you have the hardware evolving, the software keeps up, then distribution, price points fall. Gaming has come a long way from consoles to being free to play, right? Because that's in effect dropped a massive barrier to entry for people to participate in the gaming world. If you think about it, different aspects, but free to play, largely everyone has a computer, everyone has a phone. And therefore you have pretty much a very powerful device where you can do gaming. And you've been part of that journey so far, and I don't know how much you would say things like Steam have contributed to that, or Discord, or what else has happened there. I mean, from your perspective, where you're at Phoenix right now, you must be in a very tough place to evolve the space, the landscape. So are you looking at, as a publisher, building games, reworking games so that they are up to standards for people to access, whether it's free to play, whether it's console? Tell us more about that aspect of how you envision your role today. What do you feel like Phoenix is going to be doing? What's your modus operandi?
Yes. So yeah, I mean, we're going through a significant shift in the space right now. And, yes, the last time we had this was the shift to free to play. Fortunately, because we've had that experience, we can look back on that experience and, to some degree, patterns repeat themselves. And so we're seeing, very similar patterns as we shift here. One of the things that's, as I already mentioned, was that the last 5 years has been about infrastructure and about tech. But tech and infrastructure alone isn't enough to bring the mass market audience. We need great content. And so now the pivot that's happening in this space is a shift from investors, from startups, is a shift towards, okay, well, now how do we bring great content in that's going to attract those consumers, those mainstream consumers, and hopefully overcome their resistance that they're having so far. And there's a set of challenges in that space, that sort of in solving or in bringing great content to Web3 that still need to be addressed, that still need to be solved, right? You mentioned Steam. That's an example of, as ubiquitous as it is, they're anti-blockchain right now. They're not allowing NFTs. They're not welcoming blockchain. They're incredibly resistant, which is amazing because, they have secondary markets within the experience of CSGO, but Valve themselves have taken a very strong stance. So what does that mean for people who are trying to launch games? Where do we go, right? So there's a series of problems that need to be solved so that the traditional developers can come in. Now, interestingly enough, we're seeing the mobile gaming space on a decline right now from a revenue perspective in a way that we haven't seen before. And Web3 is being seen as a potential growth avenue, right? So we've got a lot of game developers, traditional top-tier game, free-to-play game developers looking at Web3 as a path to growth. But with, because of things like the Steam challenge, the small Web3 user base, they just see risk. Where's the clear path to bringing a game to market? There's if you look at DApp Radar, there's 1 million wallets engaging with blockchain games, right? I mean, that's nothing compared to the billions of gamers out there, right?
Right.
So while it's a great start, we have a lot of work to do. So traditional gamers are going, well, even if I manage to launch the game here, I'm only going to get maybe 10,000 DAUs, right? And that's not really that meaningful for me, right? So where's the path for us, right? So there's two parts to our business. One is supporting developers in those challenges and helping them go to market. We want to welcome in the next cohort of breakout Web3 games. And so we need to help de-risk those kind of challenges, right? The other side of our business that I personally find really captivating is that pretty quickly while I was in the space, in the Web3 space, I realized that Web3 games is basically finance and games colliding, right? If we look at free to play, it was essentially software as a service and games colliding. So we could look at software as a service and go, oh, they have product managers. Let's borrow that idea. They do A/B testing, they do analytics. Let's borrow those concepts. Well, now in Web3, we're dealing with things like market makers and two-sided marketplaces, trading desks, tokenized economies that are porous and can go across multiple exchanges. These are all really foreign concepts for us in games, but to the finance folks, this is what they do in their sleep. So we are bringing a heavy fusion of finance expertise into our business, and the types of things that we help developers with, and we see that as sort of the next major evolutionary step for what Web3, or the innovation that Web3 adds to games. So on one side, we have what we call the publishing. Two of our co-founders ran 70, Matt and Chris, they ran 70% of EA Mobile's business. So that was the sports franchises like Madden and FIFA,
Oh, wow.
and NBA, and then Need for Speed, Real Racing. I mean, these guys are real NFTs. They're one of a kind. They ran all the studios for these amazing products.
Wow.
And so we have an incredible depth of expertise in going to market and operating large, incredibly successful games. On the other side, our fourth co-founder, Antonio, comes from Wall Street. His bread and butter is, he was head of algo trading, prop trading. He was a CTO at investment banks like Credit Suisse, Goldman, Citi.
Wow.
So he, again, to us in games, market making, these things are, two-sided economics. These are really foreign, but to him, again, he can do it in his sleep. And so when a game developer comes into the space, one of the big challenges is I'm going from designing closed economies, inflationary economies where I have complete control, to now I have to design open tokenized economies. And that is really foreign, right? It's really foreign to me. So we are fusing finance and games, and we are providing a suite of services to help with those kind of concepts, right? And on top of that, blockchain as well is to the traditional game developers is a bit of a murky, is a bit murky. For us who've been in the space and have the vocabulary, we can talk about it all day. But to a traditional Web2 developer coming in the space, they're going, well, where do I even start? There's 20 chains. I remember how difficult it was to pick one with 3 when there was 3 chains. Now there's 20. How do I know which one to go with? And the challenge is, if you lock yourself in with a blockchain, then you're also locked in with their ecosystem.
Correct.
And that's the wallets that are compatible, the exchanges that are compatible, the marketplaces that are compatible. It completely locks you in. And could be potentially a very costly mistake.
It's kind of counterproductive, right?
Yeah, that's right. So one of the things that we're building as a piece of tech, so on one side, we've got the publishing, on the other side is a piece of tech that we're building that is fascinating to me, is, in traditional finance, they have a concept called, smart transaction routers, right? And we want to apply that concept. This is a piece of tech. I don't do it justice because I'm not a finance guy, but this is a piece of tech that essentially allows traders to arbitrage markets and move liquidity across markets, right? Well, in our case, applied to games, what we end up with is an SDK that we give to developers. And rather than them having to worry about which wallet, which exchange, which blockchain, we have that all plugged into our SDK.
Very nice. That's very nice.
And then we route transactions where they need to go, right?
Why wouldn't you offer that as a service for everyone else? Because it doesn't apply just to gaming at all.
You're absolutely right, but we know games. So
I think you're going to have to very quickly farm this out to a bunch of people that are going to come knocking on your door to use this. Because quite frankly, I can think of another 50 applications for use that people would use this for on both sides of the table, right? The users as well as the developers, like you're talking about, the ecosystems.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really fun sort of looking at what is kind of table stakes in the finance world and being like, wow, how powerful could that be in our industry, right?
Right.
It's a pretty cool time.
I think, I think just for a moment, just pausing on our conversation, we've unpacked a lot about the gaming ecosystem in Web3 that you're trying to cater to, and also sort of help people navigate through the existing challenges to build for the ecosystem or for people to consume those games from the ecosystem, right? Whether it's play to earn, pay to play, it could be a number of different formats. I just want to talk about Steam for a little bit, because I don't know how many people on our show listening right now actually know what Steam is. So can you tell everyone what Steam is? Because it really adds a lot of context to our conversation and clarity. I don't know if Ronit knows what Steam is. I'm not trying to poke holes, but just in case, it's good for us to level the understanding fields. Could you take us through what Steam is?
Yes, absolutely. Steam is basically a digital video game marketplace created by a company called Valve. Valve had a few very successful games back in the day, like Half-Life, that spawned games like CSGO and Team Fortress 2. Off the back of those games, they decided to launch a marketplace where players could come and purchase PC games. So it's not a mobile app store, it's a PC app store. But it was the first, from what I know, at least the first mass market digital video game marketplace. It was launched at a time where people were mostly buying physical retail boxes for the games that they played. You would go to the store.
Way before you could do PS5 downloads, right? You could download straight from here.
Yeah, that's right. And so you can download digitally, and it's grown into one of the staples in the gaming industry. It's a place for developers to launch games because they know players go there. It's basically a marketplace for players to find game content, right? And it's so vital to the health of the industry because it creates player liquidity, right? It's a place where you can put a game, and if it's a good game and you market your game correctly, you're going to get players, right? And we take that for granted, right? Or we took that for granted because now in Web3, we don't have that. And so where does that player liquidity come from? Imagine you're launching a multiplayer sports game, like a basketball game or a football game, right? And you have to have teams playing each other in real time. Well, in order for that to be a good experience, you need someone on the other end to be playing against you, and so you need player liquidity. And Xbox Store, PlayStation Store, Steam, the App Store, they provide this for game developers and players, and that's currently missing in Web3.
I want to just segue over in a very close parallel. We're talking about Steam, and you talked about how Steam, unfortunately, is closed off to the blockchain ecosystem themselves. And very close to that conversation sits the lawsuit and the case that we all are extremely familiar with, whether you're a gamer or not in the industry, is Epic versus Apple, right? I mean, everyone knows that story. Everyone knows what happened. Can you tell everyone about what that battle was about and why it's significant? And then I want to go into that topic with you in context to our conversation right now.
Yes, sure. I mean, it was a spectacular PR move at the time. Like, it got an incredible amount of attention just because of the way Epic went about it. They were at least basically, before I go into that, their challenge with Apple was, and it's a fair challenge, is that Apple has created a monopoly for the iPhone that they control completely. Which means they can charge, they don't allow other app stores on the device. iOS has the official app store, and that's the only place you can go to get apps. And as a result, they control the fees. There's a 30% cut that they take off of everything. You have to use their payment processors, so you can't bypass their payment processors. And they, and so, yeah, it's a rational thing to have a problem with. And so Epic decided that they were going to go and challenge that. How they did it was spectacular. I mean, what happened was that they essentially, if I remember correctly, it's been a while now, they launched Fortnite with or they updated Fortnite, because Fortnite was on the iPhone. They updated it with the ability to use a external payment processor to make purchases to bypass
Yeah,
Apple.
they rerouted the payment gateway for all payments. Yeah,
That's right. And then Apple banned them.
shut them down.
Yeah, Apple banned it, or yeah, shut it down. And then they released a whole bunch of like press and what was it? A commercial.
And this is at the peak of Fortnite users. Like, I don't even know how many users, but it was extremely globally significant.
It was. And you know what? Like, it was a bit crazy. It was, I mean, to go up against Apple, even if you're Epic, I think it was a bit crazy. You know, and Apple at the end of the day, you know, they didn't really adjust. They changed their fees for games, I think, that make under $1 million.
Correct.
Which maybe was a bit of a slap in the face to Epic. But okay, we'll change, but it's not going to impact you.
But so this is it, right? Is this the new world? Is your fundamental Phoenix looking to be the new sort of leveler of this ecosystem, saying that everyone can come on here and everyone can set up and everyone can do everything without having to be in monopolistic scenarios, right? It sounds like it caters to the desire of the market, right? I know what Apple did as an ecosystem, what Steam did as an ecosystem, extremely on point, extremely well structured, evolved at the rate brilliantly for those ecosystems the way they had to and could do. But with the pace at which Web3 is moving, do you think Phoenix is one of, or the main player that can sort of cater to this ecosystem and be a level playing field for alternative payments and liquidity in the ecosystem? What do you think?
So yes, I mean, we definitely believe in sort of breaking down the walled gardens, you know, but I would say that's not just a Phoenix thing. I think that is the core fundamental you know, theme of blockchain altogether, right? The idea of decentralization, about consumer ownership, right? And so, you know, one of the big one of the big tenets of blockchain is that the new consumer, the new Web3 consumer, wants control over their digital footprint. They want ownership over their digital footprint. You know, the things that they buy in the digital space are things that they care about, they value, and they don't want that owned by some other company that can just take it away from them, right? So that kind of flies in the face of the whole walled garden concept, right? In that, you know, walled gardens are specifically designed to, you know, minimize what players have control over. So absolutely, in Phoenix, you know, we really strongly believe in breaking down these walled gardens. You know, this is partly why we're building the SDK that we're building too, because even within blockchain, we believe that there should be a clear path of liquidity for this sort of digital economy across chains, across wallets, across marketplaces, right? We can't get to a point where we've built this decentralized blockchains, but they all are walled gardens, right? What's the point? We've kind of just recreated everything that we didn't like, but now we call it blockchain. So yes, absolutely. I mean, this is the big shift that's happening. And we are definitely see ourselves wanting to champion that concept, wanting to break down these walled gardens. We want players to be partners in the products that they engage with, because they, you know, we understand as consumers the value we bring to companies. We want to participate in that value chain. And so, yes, we're big advocates for that. We think that's what Web3 really stands for. And yeah, we look forward to sort of pushing that agenda forward. And, you know, I think we still have a long way to go, but it's an exciting future for sure.
I'd love to just jump into the business itself, just from a structural point of view, or even a revenue kind of point of view. Mm-hmm. How does Phoenix make money today? What are the categories in which you're building where you create revenues for your company?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the publishing side of things, I mean, it's very traditional publishing. We model ourselves after all the great publishers that have come before us, Electronic Arts, Take-Two, Activision, these are companies that don't necessarily build the games. They partner with great developers, or they acquire great developers, and they help with the pieces that, the peripheral pieces in getting a game to market. And in that case, traditional publishing is a rev share model. On top of that, because we're helping with the economies, right? This is the one thing I talked about. Designing token economies is very complex for the game folks. And so because of that, now we're basically creating an asset class, whether it's a fungible token for your game or an NFT for your game. We've created a new asset class that now, with finance expertise on the team, a veteran trading team, we can start to generate yield and value out of that asset class to generate value, not just for us, but for the developers that we work with. And then third, of course, is the SDK. We are routing transactions around to where they need to go. We're seeking the most optimal fees for the developer, again, to maximize yield. I mean, this is a very standard concept in finance. Man, is it cool for games. So the way we see it ultimately is that the publishing is a means for us to engage with great teams, because we have that expertise, the deep publishing expertise, and then to help them overcome some of the complexities and risks that are quite significant in the blockchain space and Web3 space with the tech that we're building.
And how big is the team today?
We're quite small. We're at 10 people. We're growing slowly. Bear market, it's rare to be in a position where I can go, if I were to start again, what would I do differently? I think one of the real problems of the last 5 years is that there was just capital being thrown left, right, and center at team, at everyone. Yes, good and bad, right? And the
you
challenge,
could tape a banana to a wall and get money for it.
Yeah, and so that made the bear market is a level set, right? It's a level set. It kind of exposes those teams that haven't been building efficiently. One of the things that's cool about publishing and the tech that we're building is that we can keep a very lean team, because we're not building the games internally. We partner with great game teams, and that's where the bulk of the cost is. You'll get 100 people dev teams sometimes, and we don't want that cost, because we want to be in a position to be able to work with many games and many game teams, right? So we're deliberately staying lean to see where the bear market goes. We're doing, planning to do 3 to 4 games this year, because data is the most important thing we can get right now to help everyone go up the learning curve. And then as we come out of the bear market, if we've got the right data and we've taken a few steps towards validating our hypotheses, then next year we can scale up more efficiently.
I think the credentials of you and your team speak for themselves if they don't scream for themselves, quite frankly. So I wouldn't be surprised if a number of developers do want to work with you, or have already sought you out, and you're overwhelmed with people who you need to cherry pick. And with that in mind, you just answered one of my questions, which I would love to go into more depth with. Is you said you're going to look at 3 or 4 games. Can you tell us about any of the games that you're going to be working on, or that we should expect to see? Or is it all confidential and you don't want to ruin the surprise? Or
what I can say is that we're heavily focused on sports, racing, and lifestyle genres, because that's what we are experts in. And what we love about those genres too is that they're very low barrier. You don't need to explain sports to people, right? People know it intrinsically. People know what football is. People know what basketball is, right?
It's not Dungeons and Dragons, right? Where you need to pick the character, what the dice is, the team concept, the maps.
Right.
Oh, it's. I have a book on my shelf.
Yes.
Dungeons and Dragons, and I started reading it. A friend of mine in Hawaii hosts a retreat in Hawaii for his Dungeons and Dragons themed catch-up sessions, and he tried to get me to do it during COVID on Discord, and that was my first engagement in Discord. And my God, till today, I have to ask for his forgiveness every time, because it's very complex.
That's right. And that creates a barrier. You have to figure out what class you need to be, you know, what's a rogue, what's a mage, you know, like how do you, right? That all creates barrier, right? So you really need to be into that kind of stuff to really go through it. Whereas sports, it's very easy to pick up, right? And in a space like Web3, where we don't have a lot of users yet, right? It's good to have a game that's really low barrier and easy to get into, right? And so what I can say is that we are going to be announcing in the next month or two a couple of games in those genres that we're really excited about. You know, we're looking at, you know, web teams that are purely Web3, that are doing really innovative stuff, really have really cool perspective on Web3. But we're also looking at traditional game developers who, you know, are know the Web2 space incredibly well and have an interesting point of view on where Web3 can fit. So, you know, we're looking at the spectrum. We're going to be announcing some great games in the next little while.
Wow, it's you know, it's, I think I have an endless stream of questions to ask about your past life as well as what you've got coming up ahead, because quite frankly, like you say, it's an open space. And you know, I sit on with Ronit, we talk to the guys from Arts DAO in Dubai very frequently, and some of them are hardcore gamers out here. And some of the concepts that they talk about in gaming today that they're experimenting with in the Web3 space are far beyond what you would have in traditional gaming. I just go back to my, you know, Nintendo and I retreat. I didn't even play my Call of Duty on my Xbox, you know. But it's a very exciting space. How do we get access to the games? How do we trial the games? How do we participate in the games? Is it published on from your website, or is it published from the developers' websites? How do people, you know, find the games that you're going to be releasing?
What I would say is follow us on Twitter at Play Fenix Games, or check us out on phoenixgames.com. You can also reach out to me, Rudy Koch. I'm not hard to find, and just stay in touch with us, because yeah, we've got some great announcements coming up, and you know, some really exciting stuff. And we're excited for players to see what we've got cooking.
Thanks a lot, Rudy. From my side, it's been a pleasure, and look forward to interacting with you again soon. Back to you, Ronit.
Just to wrap it all up on a personal note, Rudy, you've moved to Dubai from the US. You're moving your family over here. Why the middle of the desert? Why are you leaving the promised land of the US and coming here?
You know, I mean, the one of the bigger challenges that I think everybody can agree with in Web3 right now is the regulatory landscape. You know, the SEC in particular has taken a strong stance, or I don't know if you can even call it that. I just think it's just unclear what the stance is, and that's creating a lot of challenges. I've already been through the process of having a Web3 startup based in the US and experienced all the challenges of what that means. And so, you know, when it came time to do the new venture, I said, well, someone out there, there's got to be a region out there that's seeing this and sees this as an opportunity to take a leadership position globally in the space. And UAE was one of those regions. And the more I got familiar with the UAE and their appetite for innovation, Web3 and games, I mean, if you've been here, you know that at least in Dubai, they love to go big. So, you know, for us, as we think about wanting to be nimble and we want to innovate and move quickly, we need to be in a place that supports that from a regulatory perspective. And they've been incredibly collaborative here, and they're thinking about it right. And, you know, if they play their cards right, they will be a leader for the next evolution in the games industry. And it's really exciting to be part of that. I'm really excited to be here, being part of that movement.
And up to now, in your career, you've been largely West Coast based, is it?
Yes.
Yeah,
most of my life, actually.
Most of your life. So this is like a big thing for you, professionally and personally.
That's right. Fortunately, I'd say Dubai is not a hard place to get in, you know.
Understatement.
Yeah, I mean, I brought my wife here, and she, you know, she'd never been out here before, and you know, you have no idea what to expect, and you've got Waitrose and Marks and Spencer's. I mean, done deal.
Hang on, Waitrose swung it for Mrs. Rudy. Okay.
It didn't have to be the man-made island of the Palm or the tallest building in the world or the Museum of the Future. It was Waitrose.
It was just the overpriced, expensive European products in Waitrose.
We got our produce. We're happy people. Simple
Wow,
as
those
it is.
strawberries are
Just
something
gave a
else.
plug to Waitrose Garage. Did we call them and get a sponsorship deal? I don't know.
I think so. I think that's the only way to sort of get Carrefour and Waitrose competing to be one of
I
those.
know.
Yes,
Yeah,
well,
we'll have to get one of the other founders to talk about Carrefour next weekend.
I think it can be arranged. Just
Can be
let me
arranged.
know.
Majid Al Butayim as well. Let's keep it going. Rudy, thank you so much for your time today. We went from Club Penguin to Waitrose via Web3 games. All the best settling into Dubai and onwards and upwards.
thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
All the best.